Well, it's getting, I think it's getting very, very nasty. And there's no question about it. Because, you know, one of the things being, you know, I've been in Washington a long time, and I represent people on both sides of the aisle, so.
And you go full circle with them. You investigate them like McCain, and then so many years later, you're their
Well, that's
lawyer.
a hell of a compliment when you know, McCain actually did me a favor one time. He was giving an address to a bunch of lawyers and executives, and he saw me in the front row, and he said, you know, he said, one of the worst periods of my life was when I was locked up in a bamboo prison. He said there was only one worse, and when Bob Bennett cross-examined me, and then he came over, he says, how was that? And I said, fantastic.
You know what I think? I think maybe you should moderate the next debate.
Yeah, well, I would do it a lot differently.
No kidding?
I thought the moderators, now maybe they were terribly restrained by the rules, but anybody could,
break the rules.
Anybody could have done that. They were silly. They didn't really.
Yeah.
You know, I know I'm talking about icons, but you know.
You can talk about icons. You probably felt the same way watching the congressional committees.
They were silly.
Talk to the guys from AIG and Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, you see, one of the big problems with Congress is that it's always after the fact they have their hearings. Nobody is. Most of our problems, I think, in the world and in our country are long-term problems. And they're all operating on the short term. You know, when I did the Dornberger investigation, an interesting conclusion I reached was, you know, I'm investigating him for getting money for what purportedly were one thing when it really was for another. But the real sin here is here's a United States senator that made 123 speaking engagements, most of which were out of town, over a relatively short period of time. And I concluded that, well, who's watching the store? Who's tending to the country's business? You know?
Yeah.
But that wasn't even within my mandate. Nobody would even listen to me on something.
Well, you had some of the same thoughts with Clinton. When you were representing Bill Clinton, you were constantly struck by how he was having to talk to you and run the country at the same time, and you were sort of torn. But he needed you, so.
Well, that's true. I mean, I remember when I appeared before the Supreme Court, and Justice Souter said, well, I don't see why the president will be very busy, but you'll be. Well, that was just dead wrong. I mean, one day I talked to the president 4 times, and I said to him after the 4th call, usually you let the president in but I had a conference with the judge in the case, and I said, Mr. President, I gotta go. He said, yeah. He said, I gotta get back to Iraq, and you know, I said, gee, we're crazy here. I understand George Stephanopoulos was a guest last time.
Yeah.
Well, I remember one day I'm over in the Oval Office talking with the president, and George at the time was a senior, you know, one of his most senior advisors, and the cabinet was there. There's a room right off the Oval Office, and the cabinet was there, and I'm talking to him about the Paula Jones case, and George is coming out saying, we're going to lose the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State in 2 minutes. You've got to. He came out. And again, as I walked back to the office, I said, there's something wrong about all this.
Now, all these years later, post 9/11, and now with what we're in, when you look back on the Monica Lewinsky, Paula Jones, whatever you want to call it, what was that about?
You want the X-rated version, or do you want me to?
I want hindsight, and
what it was about was a number. I mean, it was about a number of things. I don't think anyone. I mean, I have to be careful because he was a client, but no one can justify the conduct of President Clinton. I mean, I think he has acknowledged and has publicly apologized for it, and as is appropriate that he do that. But really so I'm not commenting, but really what was going on was to defeat him in the 1996 election. And when I got hired to represent him, that was my job, to get this thing beyond the 96 election. And when the Supreme Court of the United States agreed to hear the case, you know, Lloyd Cutler and I celebrated because we knew that the whole case would be put on hold. The haters of President Clinton wanted this to be on the front page.
Then you lost that, so that was
well, but we got
crushing for you, wasn't it?
We got it beyond the '96 election. Now, would I have was I upset that we lost it? Sure. You know, I want to win everything.
You took it physically almost, didn't you?
I almost did take it physically. Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't go into a deep depression, or I was very upset, and I'm grateful that I lost it 9-0, because had I lost it 5-4, I'd be driving myself. I should have done this. I should have.
Yeah, right.
I mean, even John Roberts wouldn't have won that one with a conservative Supreme Court.
But you thought also that
But the truth is, and
yeah.
I'm not just saying that because, as you know from my book, I'm pretty honest about myself. The real win there was getting it beyond the '96 election. And most people thought I had won it in the court, but I didn't.
But you also thought to some extent that this was about, whether you want to call it Ken Starr being sexually repressed, I think you call him a Boy Scout, but that played a part in his...
well, that I never, you know, I didn't read my chapter before I came over here. I think maybe I should have. I don't recollect saying he was sexually repressed.
You listen closely to the person.
Now, I'm not saying he's not sexually repressed.
Okay.
I said that
all right. Boy Scout was your term.
You got to be careful with you. Boy,
Boy Scout was your term.
I was, yes, I was.
But you implied in saying that he was a Boy Scout that there was some of his personal feelings about sexual behavior that were...
I was very concerned. I was actually fishing. I don't fish that much, actually, but I was fishing in Montana in a canyon.
Yeah.
And the famous White House switchboard could not find me. Maybe the first time they could not actually find somebody. I was deep in this canyon fishing. And when I got back, I got a panicky call from the judge's wife, who I was fishing with, the judge, and she said, call Camp David. So I called, and I did speak to the president. Without going into detail, I did express the view that there was a good and a bad side to the appointment of Starr. The good was he had so much political baggage that you know, a lot of people don't really appreciate. Now, let me make it clear. I always liked Ken Starr. Our kids went to school together, and I have high regard for him, and I was not of a lot of the Clinton supporters were just attacking him viciously, which I think was unfair. But he should never have been appointed, and he shouldn't have accepted the appointment. He did legal work with the lawyers for Paula Jones. Mm-hmm. Ken Starr billed Paula Jones's lawyer for time he spent with them. I mean, and then he goes on and takes over this part of the case.
But still you thought he was on a moral crusade.
I thought this. I thought, the good thing I thought when I made the call to the president was that he had a lot of baggage, so no matter what he decides, a lot of people won't have confidence in it, because he had so many partisan aspects. He also had given talks about it. Any lawyer I know would have recused himself from a matter like that. He didn't. The bad part was I knew Ken well enough to know that he does have this Boy Scout aura about him, and that he would be terribly, terribly offended, so offended by the sexual aspects of the case that he might lose his objectivity. And there was something very naive about Ken. You know, I've been, don't take this the wrong way, but, you know, yeah, you say I represent all these high-profile people, but, you know.
Because you do.
I do, but I didn't start out representing them, you know. I represented bookies, and I made...
You represented the other kind of crooks.
You know, listen, we all rise above principles sometimes. No,
you
entitled to a defense.
You saw a market and white-collar crime, and you went after it.
Yeah, but my my point is I was very, very worried that he would overreact. Mm-hmm.